Welcome to the Purple Phoenix.
They are. How do they fall? The bigger they are, the harder they fall.
Stench of your spirit is your mind is full. You lost your right to a swift death.
I can't do that right now. I'll manage that right now.
So I wanted to make a new build video. The last one, my voice came across really quiet. I guess the recording wasn't very good. I'm going to try to speak a little bit louder, and hopefully this one's a little more clear. And plus I have a few things to update in my build. So I just showed some gameplay footage for you to understand and see how the build works in action. So let's cover the character sheet. So I put all my points into toughness, as you can see here. All of these points, ferocity, agility, and wisdom, are just from passive gear. Literally every time I level, I put everything into toughness, which really isn't that much health. I can get this much higher and have some more survivability, but the trade-off in my build is less DPS. And for me, just being as comfortable with my build as I am, 97,000 is just enough with my resists. As you can see, you're sitting roughly at about 80%. So let's cover all this. Okay, damage, don't worry too much about that. The one thing I want to highlight right here is that I have 54, almost 55% crit chance, yet I have no points into ferocity. So how I get that, and I made an entire video series, which I definitely recommend watching, to explain how Frostweave works and how you can achieve this high of a crit chance without putting any points into ferocity whatsoever. So definitely check that out, and I'll put a link to that in the description of this video. But anyway, just wanted to point that out. So that's really, really nice to have in this kind of a build, because you don't have to sacrifice any survivability. You can dump everything into toughness and still achieve a ton of crit chance by having that one unique, which is really, really nice. I already covered the resists, which is really important. And I'm going to point out two other things. One, that I have 30 ailment stacks, where I can get up to 30 ailment stacks per ailment type. So there's 7 different types of stackable ailments in this game, because you cannot actually apply freeze. That just actually freezes the enemy. So that leaves actual 7 types of stacks that you can, or 7 types of ailments, and up to 30 stacks each of that ailment. So I have the potential to apply 210 ailment stacks on each individual enemy, which is really, really nice. The other thing I wanted to talk about is there's an actual overall effective hit point formula, is what I was trying to say. And how you do that, you take your overall HP, your overall health, and you divide that by 1 minus your resistances in a decimal format. So in this case, my average, we'll say, is about 80% resist. So I would take, just let's round this up to 100,000 just for simplicity's sake. So I would take 100,000 and I would divide that by 1 minus 0.8, which equals 0.2. So I would literally do, the formula would be 100,000 divided by 0.2, which if you did the math on that would be 500,000 effective hit points. So you can achieve that different ways. You can do it like that, or I think the other equivalent of that would basically be 150,000 health and either 70 or 75% resist. I'm doing all the math in my head real quick, but it's something like that, right? So that's how you get the formula. But I definitely recommend trying to have about 500,000 effective hit points for going this kind of build, where you're just literally standing there face tanking. And lifesteal is really, really crucial in this build. 3% on spell isn't enough, so I actually have lifesteal on my attack. So once they're all clumped up and I'm spamming my bleeding edge spill, 8%, I mean, I'm just healing right through it, which is really, really nice to have. Okay, so let's cover the passive skills. So I'll zoom out. Yep, you should be able to see the entire skill tree. And I'll also link this in the description, so you don't have to rewatch the video over and over. You can just pull it up on a web browsing session and check that out. But I'm going to talk about from pretty much leveling from level 1 and onwards. So depending on whatever level you are, you can kind of use this as a general guideline for this type of build if you're interested in it. So I would start completely on the inner ring. I would definitely take all the soldier skills first, and then I would work your way over to the scholar tree. Definitely make sure you're taking elemental ailment chance, because again, that synergizes with the Frostweave chest, and I explained this in great detail, like I said, in the other video, so I won't keep going into it. I'm just going to hover over some of these. I probably won't cover every single one, just because by now I think most people understand what most of these do, and you'll be able to review it based off of the link. But definitely take this first, then into Scholar, and then I would work my way into Kabbalist. Now, Kabbalist is really nice because this is what allows you to get all those stacks, right? Because any spell or attack by default, you only get to apply 1 ailment per skill or per attack. This allows you to apply 2. So why that's important is, like I mentioned, there's 7 types of ailments. This is the way how you're able to apply all 7 ailments, even though you only have 5 different skills. Well, I should say, I guess, with an auto attack's really 6, right? But you have to take this if you want to be able to apply all 7 different ailments. And then with this, so when I talk about ailment stacks, as I mentioned before, there's 7 different types. We can get up to 30 stacks per ailment type, giving us a total of 210. So up to those 210, you're going to times that by 5%. Wait, I'm not doing that right. Let me rephrase. Okay, so you're not actually going to do this only allows you to do 5 stacks of each damage type. So let me rephrase that. So 7 different elements at up to 5 stacks per element type, giving us a total of up to 35 of these. But it's 5% damage, so 35 times 5 is what, 175% extra damage if you had all 7 stacks. So that's really nice. And you get 10 by default. You're getting 5 here, giving us 20. And then over here into Time Weaver, you get 5 here and 5 here. So that's how you get your 30 stacks, is from all of those. So once you finish the Kabbalist, I work your way over into Warlock. So this right here, Residual Energy, this is multiplicative damage. So this one is huge. When you're doing a hybrid build, this is an absolute must-have for any hybrid build. So when you cast a spell and then you use an attack, that attack gains 30% multiplicative damage. And I have a unique catalyst that has this same ability, and I also have it on, I believe, 1 ring. But you can actually get it on any ring and your necklace, your accessory. So you can get this from quite a few different locations. You could probably get this up to like 100%, but just know that this is multiplicative damage, which is way more than the rest of these skill tree or skill passives that are given additive damage. So definitely take that. And then from there, once you get, say, above 30% crit chance, I would definitely start looking at taking Merciless Lethality, which is in the Assassin tree. So this lowers your overall damage by a bit, but it's giving you an additional 60% crit damage. So once you start critting often, the trade-off becomes worth. If you're really low on crit chance, I wouldn't take this till, like I said, probably you're above about 30% crit chance when this actually starts to be really good. And obviously when you're at like 50+% crit chance, this is a really nice trade-off. So that's about the point that I would take that. And then from there, you probably want to start looking at taking the Praetorian, which we're generating health globes, which is going to synergize really well with our skill anomaly. It's going to suck in those health globes and do damage. So that's pretty nice. Plus we're getting resist, we're getting health. So I would definitely start doing that, plus crit damage. That's pretty good. And then probably work your way up into Time Weaver, which time cannot heal. So because we're applying stasis, we're going to be doing an additional 120% damage 1.5 seconds later to enemies that were hit. So that's a really nice one. And Dire Junction. So I get my survivability from 3 spells alone. Dire Junction, which prevents you from getting one shot. So as I mentioned, I have about 500,000 effective hit points. So let's say you're fighting that dude with the cleaver. I forget what he's called, right? But he's got that one-shot mechanic, which he like does that charged up cleaver. Let's say that does 500,000 damage. Without Dire Junction, I just get one shot, right? I'm done for. But what Dire Junction does is it splits that damage. So you take 40% right away, and then 1 second later, you're going to take the additional 60%. So why is that important? You're still taking the damage, but it's splitting it in half, meaning that when you take the first 40%, you're life stealing, right? Because I'm doing so much damage and I have a ton of life steal in my build. So I take 40% damage, immediately heal it back up, and then I take the 60% damage. So now I'm below half, and then I heal it back up again. So this is to prevent you from getting one shot. The 2 other abilities that prevent me from getting one shot, over here in the Siege Breaker, you're going to take Salvatory Anchor, which in my case doesn't help me on my chest because I'm taking the Frostweave, but I'm using elevated gain. So my helmet, which I'll show you, has about 750 resist. So what this does is this multiplies it by 2. So instead of 750 resist, I'm actually getting 1500 resist from my helmet, which is crazy. And then the last way that I'm able to survive is by taking, also in the Siege Breaker, the Disallowing Vessel. So when you're stationary, so I basically use my movement spell to get around the Ether Jump. So I'm getting these stacks all the time. They're very, very high. I mean, I don't always have it at 10, but for the most part, it's, you know, it's up there, right? As you can see from the video, I have lots of these stacks. And why that's important, not only am I doing more damage, but from this particular skill, I'm also gaining additional resist. So when you have 10 stacks, which is max of these points, if you have 10 stacks, that's 100%. Your resist just doubled, which is crazy. So those 3 alone are preventing me from getting one shot. I can just stand there and face tank it all day, which is fantastic. Okay, so we talked about that. Oh, I didn't talk about this. So, this is okay. You know, a little bit of extra block chance. This is definitely the last thing I would take, depending on what level you are. My current thought process is, I'm level 81, is to take this and then to work my way over to the Arms Meister. So I'm planning on basically getting this eventually. I haven't really found anything better, but just know that that's kind of what I'm planning. This is pretty nice. As again, I already mentioned, we're doing stasis damage to the enemy, so this and which time can I heal are really good. So this is just free 25% damage. I'm getting life still from this. When enemies are clumped up, which I'm using all the time with Anomaly, I'm doing additional damage to all enemies because they're clumped up within a 4-meter radius. That's fantastic. And this over here in the EOS tree, this is a free 15% multiplicative, basically bonus to damage if you want to think about it. When the enemy gets down to their last 15%, they just get one shot. So if you're fighting a boss and they have 100,000, or excuse me, not 100,000, 100 million hit points, as soon as they touch 15 million and you have sacred damage, you know, which is weakness in your build, they just instantly die. And you have to take this point to do that to champions. And this is how I get poison. I had to take 4 points just to get this, but the way the spells work is sometimes the listed spell damage, because you got to remember you have 2 different potential ailment types, but sometimes they get overridden as soon as one of the other buffs kick in from Immortal Offering. So an enemy, let's say an enemy dies and they only have burn and poison applied to them, and now all of a sudden you're getting the additional damage from just those 2. That means that in that situation, the poison and the burn bonus damage will get applied to everything. So it has the potential to overwrite what the current ailment on your spell is. I hope that makes sense. I'll kind of explain that a little bit more when I talk about the passes, but if you're having trouble stacking poison, which in my case I am, you can do this, right? And this just allows you to stand next to enemies and you're gaining a poison stack every 2 seconds. So yeah, there's that. I think I covered all the passes. Yep, okay. So let's talk about spells. So the whole point of this build is to get 7 different ailment stacks, to CC the enemies a little bit using Anomaly, and then to just burst them down using Bleeding Edge. So pretty much the rotation is clump them up with Anomaly, right? So now they're clumped up. You can cast Plague Burst, Tear, and then I jump on them using Lightbringer.
I need more power.
And then I could just sit there and cast Bleeding Edge to dump all my rage. And so these are all AoE, right? So you're just clumping them up. that's basically what the rotation looks like. You're just clumping them up and then AoEing them down. But this is the modifiers that I've taken. Anomaly, this is definitely how I would do it. Increase the area of effect, the the duration, the ability to cast 2 different vortexes, and then to pull them in multiple times, which again is not only doing damage, but it's CCing them so that they can't get out of it. And then, as I mentioned, we're generating health globes, and this is going to pull those health globes in and then do damage inside of that vortex, which is really nice. Plague Burst, this allows Plague Burst to have a greater chance for those health globes to drop, so that's really important. Making the area of effect bigger, and leaving a poisonous gas cloud, which is going to become a dot, which anything in a dot obviously is going to apply your elements, so that's really important. And then this increases the explosion damage for each element stack a monster has. So if they have every single element full stacks, when they explode, this is just going to do that much more explosion damage to everything around them. So all synergizes really, really well. And this is really nice because when they're inside of this poisonous gas or this plague burst effect, you actually gain and increase it, or your chance to inflict ailments inside of that. So that's really, really crucial. That obviously is going to allow you to get to your max 30 stacks of each element that much faster. And then crit damage is just really, really nice in this game to have. So anywhere you can get crit damage and you have extra points, definitely take it. Tier, this is how we're getting our fire damage. Oh, I should back up a little bit. Let me back up. So we're getting stasis from anomaly. We're actually not consistently getting shock from this, because if you don't know how the element stacks work, it takes your top 2 damage. So by default, you only get 1 element type. So in that case, it would take your top damage, which, as you can see from here, that would be ether, right? Basically 1200 damage. Everything else is roughly 200 to 300 damage. So if we only had the ability to do 1 element stack, it would pretty much always just be stasis. However, because we took that ability in our passive skill tree to add a second one, it looks at the next highest damage, which in this case is lightning at 333. The problem is because lightning damage is so close to fire, frost, sacred, and shadow, as I was mentioning before, it can easily get overtaken, and then I'm no longer consistently applying shock damage using anomaly. So I'm not relying on anomaly to apply shock. I'm only relying on anomaly to apply stasis. And that same principle applies to Plague Burst. Even though poison is several hundred points higher than all the others, it suffers from the exact same problem, and often poison as well as shock get overtaken. So I don't reliably use Plague Burst to apply any stack. I'm pretty much using it just for the ability to drop more health globes, which synergizes with Anomaly, as well as the increased damage once enemies explode. It does a splash effect to everything around. So I'm basically purely using this for damage. Tier, on the other hand, I am using it to get fire stacks. So you convert the frost damage into fire damage. So I'm definitely using it for that. Reduction in cooldown and turning this into a dot. So why that's important, if I didn't have this, it would drop it 1 time and it would apply, or have the chance to apply 1 stack. Whereas by turning this into a dot, it's going to easily apply the 30 stacks that you want it to. So definitely take that. Again, reducing cooldown is really good, and then we're just trying to increase our damage, as well as honestly trying to use more willpower, because oftentimes I have way more willpower than I want, so that's actually really good. And I have actually converted my jump to the no cooldown so that I can use this also for mobility purposes as well as a willpower dump so that I can continually use my bleeding edge. Okay, so for Lightbringer, I'm actually using this to not only do AoE damage, but I actually use this to apply 2 different ailment types. I use this to apply my weakness and my shock. So this will actually force it to consistently apply weakness and shock, which is really nice. So definitely take that. Charging speed, area of effect doing damage, that's nice. Increase your chance to inflict ailments, that's really good. Increase damage and increase damage. So this I kind of already talked about, but definitely I use this for the willpower dump as well as mobility, increasing the range. I can also apply stasis. You could either take that or think no, I think that's why I took it. That's pretty much, there was really nothing else to use it on, so this has the ability to help apply stasis stacks if I need to. This is nice. Attack speed is actually really underrated in this game. You'll notice when if you don't have any attack speed that your bleeding edge spill or attack can be kind of slow. When you actually start putting some attack speed into it, it makes this go so much faster, which therefore is an actual DPS increase. So I definitely recommend using that. Same thing here, removing crowd control, that's pretty nice. I had the point, so might as well, right? As soon as you get stunned or whatever, some of those enemies that stun you, just cast this and it'll remove that. And then increasing your movement speed after completing a teleport is just a really nice quality of life. Bleeding Edge, I definitely recommend taking these particular modifiers. So increasing the projectile speed, obviously the faster it goes, the more damage you're applying. Increase damage, increase your critical damage. This allows the Bleeding Edge to last a second longer, which is the main reason for taking this. So you cast it once, and it's going to actually circle around doing that many more hits for an extra second. So definitely take that. And then increase damage per ailment stack. So this synergizes really well with our build because we're applying lots and lots of ailment stacks. So this is just going to make our damage go through the roof. So that covers all of those. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. I almost forgot. I need to cover Mark of the Impurity. Because we are using the trial belt, you definitely want to take these particular modifiers for Mark of the Impurity. So more damage, more damage, more damage. I actually don't know if these work. And the reason I say that is, let me show you the character sheet. And I'd love for somebody to leave a comment and see what their thoughts are about this. But from the character sheet, it says we have the curse efficiency of 5 to 34%. So in my mind, if I was to take these modifiers off, that should be affected. That should adjust those numbers, but it doesn't. So I don't know if that's just a tooltip bug or a character sheet bug, or if these actually don't work. I'm not totally sure. So like I said, I'd love somebody else's input, but regardless, the two main reasons, or the two modifiers that are really crucial, is this one, because this is going to stack 10 stacks anytime there's an enemy marked. And then this one, when they get killed, I believe it's 15% of their max HP is splash damage. So that synergizes, again, with the splash damage from Plague Burst. That's pretty nice. So these two are kind of the crucial. And what's cool about the Trial Belt is anytime you're attacking an enemy, you're applying Mark of Impurity. So every enemy you hit, they're getting marked, which means that they're getting curse stacks against them, and then when they die, they're doing 15% damage of their total HP to everything around them. So that's why it's really cool when you're clumping up enemies, with anomaly, and one of them explodes, they're doing damage to everything that's left. And then when the next one dies, it's doing damage to the next one and the next one. So when enemies clump up and die, you see that they just die so fast as soon as the first one pops. It's like they literally all pop together because it just does so much damage. So it's really, really cool. So I've talked a little bit about the build, but we'll go into it in detail here. As I mentioned, the helmet 747, so that's roughly almost 1500 from the passive tree, which is really nice. Of course, definitely take cooldown here, as well as on your legs, pants, whatever you want to call them. If you are not using the Frostweave chest, I would definitely also take cooldown. I think that that's super, or it's really good with this build. Anytime you're just spamming your skills, cooldown is really nice. So if you can get material damage or just percentage damage, that's really good. I actually think that using this build, that the combination of material damage on some items and then percent damage on others, like this one, is really, really good, and I highly recommend it. And the reason I say that is because percent damage is going to affect your spells, and attacks. And because we took residual energy, as well as this catalyst, which has that same thing where attacks gain X percentage damage from the last spell cast. When our spells do more damage, it's gonna therefore in turn make your bleeding edge do more damage. So percent damage is really good, and like I said, a kind of a combination is probably the best overall DPS. But if you get one or the other, I would say it's fine. I would definitely, for your helmet, first and foremost, focus on as much resistance as you can get, and then definitely you want cooldown. For the shoulders, so you'll notice that I took heavy gear on everything, and that's because I want toughness from everything. I want as much toughness there, and as I already mentioned, I put all my points from all my levels into toughness. That's how I'm getting all my hit points. And because I have quite a bit of resist, I'm able to achieve that 500,000 effective hit points. So definitely for shoulders and your gauntlets, it's kind of the same story. You want rage and willpower cost reduction, resist, and then some type of damage modifier. So on here it's percent damage modifier, here it's material, this one's percent damage, and that one's material. If you can squeeze it, I actually think the best in slot would be some type of damage modifier, rage and willpower cost decrease, as I already talked about it, toughness, and resists, and then maximum health. Like that would be like the dream, right? Which I don't have. I haven't been able to roll that yet. But like on this one right here, if I could get rid of resource generation and make that 1,000 maximum health, that would be amazing. That would be like a god roll for this build. And that same thing applies to the heavies. So this one's actually pretty close. If you changed the all resistance score to just flat resist, like if that was like 200 flat resist, that would basically be a god roll. Again, you can't have it perfect, or I haven't gotten it perfect, but it's pretty close. Legs, similar. So there's going to be pretty much a theme with all these. So I already mentioned that you want cooldown on this, but you want to get transfer time here as well if you can, and then resist, and then some kind of damage modifier. So that's good there. Similar to your boots, except I really like movement speed. So if you can squeeze movement speed on your boots as well, definitely get that. Amulets, so I already talked about this in a previous video, but I just want to highlight it because it's important. You need frost damage to both spells and attacks in order for your spells and attacks to benefit from Frostweave. And so I'll show you just really quick because I didn't mention it before. See, my crit chance is at 55 here. That's a spell. And then it's also 55 on attack. Because in my build, even though I have better rings and better amulets, well, actually not amulets, but definitely rings. I have better rings. But I have to use these ones because these are the only rings that I have frost damage to attack. And then on here, frost damage to spells. That's why I'm using these. But anyway, I just wanted to highlight that. Back to the accessory. So this one's really nice because, again, we're a hybrid build. So having a mixture of attack and flat spell damage is awesome, as well as having the percent material damage modifier. And then the +2 element stacks is really nice. So anytime you're applying a dot and it's going to apply 1 dot, it's actually applying 3. And I think this also works with Mark of Impurity. So when it says it's applying 10 stacks when a target is marked, I actually think that in this case, from this accessory alone, it's actually applying 30. I think that's how it works. If somebody has actually verified that some way, I'd love your comments on that, but I think that's how that works. And I have that same on here. If that is true, then obviously you would only need it on either the amulet or one of your rings. But again, as I mentioned, I'm using this ring specifically for the frost damage. But yeah, they're pretty nice. So a god roll ring would be similar to this, meaning that you have 3 flat damages, so a mix of flat damage spells and attacks. Obviously you would need the combination to have frost damage to spell and attack, as I mentioned. It would also have a percent material damage, and then definitely this last thing where it's the attacks gain X% damage from the last cast. So that's the same thing on this as I already talked about. So I get 28 from here, 12 from this, which gives me 40, and then I get an additional 30 from the residual energy passive skill, which I talked about. So I'm getting 70%, and what that looks like, how you can test that. So right now, without any buffs or anything, my bleeding edge is 33,000. When I cast a spell, it's going to go up 70%. So it went from 33k to 57k. And this lasts about, I think it's like 8.9 seconds. Because by default, it has, I believe it's 5 seconds. And I can't remember, I've totally forgot now. There's a modifier, I believe, in my passive tree. Let me see if I can find it. I think it's this one. Yeah, so this modifier right here gives you the extra 75%. So 5 seconds, you multiply that by 75%, and you do the math. So it's probably really like 7.5 seconds or whatever it is, right? But that's how you get that modifier. That modifier directly affects this particular, like in this instance, this skill. So that's really, really nice. The weapon, this is like a god roll weapon. I was really lucky to craft this. So not only does it have a lot of damage, but I want to point out it has the life leech, which I already talked about why I think that's important. It has max crit chance, crit damage. I got 30%. And then I have almost 300% elemental ailment chance. And as I mentioned from my previous video, but again, just to re-highlight it, the Frostweave needs freeze chance. Elemental ailment chance is freeze ailment chance. So this 300% is freeze chance. So it's 300% freeze chance. And the way the Frostweave works is it takes that freeze chance and directly applies it to your crit chance. So the majority of that 55% crit chance that I'm gaining from my spells and attacks right here, the 55%, the majority of that all comes from this weapon right here, that 299% elemental ailment chance. So yeah, if you can get a dagger anything close to this, it's totally worth. And I've already talked about this, so yeah, that's the build in a nutshell. Hopefully you guys enjoy it. I really love this build. I've actually been recently playing with the offline and making the absolute perfect gear and perfect build, and obviously a level 90 character, and kind of toying with that just to kind of see the difference. And it's a lot of fun. I should mention, I don't think I showed it in the video, but right now this bleeding edge is 33,000. I can get this up to 118,000. As soon as I hit my 7 stacks, this goes up to 118,000, which I actually have better rings. I have a ring that's similar to this one that I could put over here, but it doesn't have the frost damage to attack. So I can actually put those rings on and get this up to 125,000, but then I don't have as much crit chance because I'm not getting the benefit of frost weave. But yeah, it's getting really, really good, and I'm really happy with it so far. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoy the video. Let me know if you have any questions, and I will do my best to answer them.